Good afternoon, everyone. This is Gretchen Wall, the coordinator of the Produce Safety Alliance. We're just getting started now, so I want to give you one last opportunity to check your speakers and your audio and make sure that you've got them adjusted properly. You can join this meeting either by calling in or joining through the computer audio. So if one's not working for you, you can always try the other one. So I'd like to welcome everybody to our first Produce Safety Alliance annual trainers and lead trainers update call. This is the first opportunity that we've had to have all of our PSA trainers and lead trainers on the call to provide some pertinent updates. So what we're planning to cover during this call is just a general welcome and introduction of the PSA team if you haven't met some of our team members before. I'll be talking about some of the PSA milestones over the past year and a few of the things that we accomplished back in 2017 as well, and talking about training capacity. We'll review some of the FDA guidance documents and recent announcements that PSA trainers and lead trainers should be aware of during their grower training courses, and if you're a trainer of trainers, during your Train the Trainer courses. Donna is actually going to be reviewing some of our new and updated PSA educational materials. Connie will be talking about online course updates, some of our social media activities and communications. And then we'll wrap it up with a quick reminder of some of the PSA policies. And Betsy will be talking about some of the PSA's plans for 2019 and our goals. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Betsy Bin, who's the director of the Produce Safety Alliance. Betsy?
Hello, everyone. Thanks to everyone for taking time to be on the call with us today. It's a pleasure to have you all here because you've been doing a lot of work. It is my pleasure to introduce the Produce Safety Alliance team. I'm hoping most of you know these individuals. We do have someone new, so I do want to cover that. Gretchen introduced herself, and she is, of course, a coordinator. Also located in Geneva, New York with me would be Michelle Humiston, who handles a bunch of our extension support duties and keeps us organized. Rob Way takes care of everything online and the website layout. I do want to mention Laura Acuna Maldonado, who is in this picture on the right side of the screen. She's the newest member of our team. She, for the last 6 years, has instructed our online Good Agricultural Practices course at Cornell University. She is a native Spanish speaker, which is why her position and her skills are so important to us. She has a really good foundation in good agricultural practices and produce safety, and she will be leading an effort to transition many of our materials to Spanish, develop a Spanish website, and really help in that outreach related to Spanish speakers and the need for bilingual educational materials. She has a BS in agronomy and a Master's of Science in horticulture, and of course a PhD in horticulture. So we're very happy to have her, and she is the newest member of our team. Moving on from there, if you move west, you'll see Kristen Woods is our Southeast Regional Extension Associate. Don Steckel is our Midwest Extension Associate. Connie Fisk is our Northwest Extension Associate. And Donna Clements is our Western Extension, Southwestern Extension Associate. I do want to note that Donna Clements is in fact Donna Paul, just with a name change. So we didn't get a new Donna, in case anybody is wondering. But these guys do a lot of great work. I'm sure many of you know them and will agree with that assessment. So with that, I'll hand it back to Gretchen.
Okay, thanks, Betsy. Before we jump into the rest of the presentation, I just want to make note that everyone's on mute right now because we do have quite a few attendees on this call. So you're welcome to use, there's a Q&A box down below where you can use the chat function, and one of the PSA team will try to respond to your question if we're able to during the call. If not, you can put in your questions and we can collect those, and we'll try to address those in notes at the end of the meeting that we'll be sending out. You also notice that there's a little blinking red dot probably on your screen. That indicates that we are recording this webinar, and we will be sharing it both on our website and through the PSA trainers and lead trainers listserv after this is all over. So in case you need to jump off, or you have somebody, a colleague that you know that was unable to join us, this is being recorded, and we will be sharing this information in the recording after the call, along with the PowerPoint slides. If you have taken a look at the chat, I did put a resource in there, and I'm going to post it in here again. Throughout this presentation, we're going to be talking about a lot of documents, a lot of resources, and a lot of updates. So we've put together a handy file that walks through all of those web URLs by slide. So as we're discussing something, when one of the PSA team is talking about a particular resource, you should find in the document that I just posted into the chat box, that PDF document, you should find those resources linked directly so that you can have access to those. So with that, I wanted to talk quickly about some of our 2018 and 2017 milestones. If you've been following along with the PSA, we've had a pretty busy year. Starting back in 2017, we hosted 3 national soil summits. 2 of those were in 2017, and then one of those was in 2018. 2017 was in Geneva, New York, and Houston, Texas, and then the 2018 Soil Summit was in Atlanta, Georgia. And we are currently working on the summary documents, but I encourage you to visit the PSA's website. Under the Resources tab, there's a drop-down both for the Soil Summit as well as the Water Summit with more information, and that's where we'll be posting any summaries that come out of those meetings. In addition, in February of 2018, we hosted a National Water Summit, which was attended in person by 102 people, and that was hosted in Covington, Kentucky. If you're familiar with what happened at the Water Summit, we actually had 24 remote sites and 243 attendees that attended at those remote sites. So we actually had a lot more participation in the Water Summit discussions beyond just the group that was in Covington, Kentucky. In addition, we streamed that meeting live, and that was available for people to watch online. And we had individuals from 7 different countries, the US and Puerto Rico, who participated in the live streaming option. Again, all of that information about the Water Summit, including the presentations, is on our website. So I would encourage you to check that out. We are also working on the Water Summit summary paper, and that should be coming out here in the next few months. In addition, the PSA team participated in an advanced trainer course hosted at UC Davis back in May of 2018. We had 47 participants from 21 states who attended that course, and that allowed us to work on some development of scenario-based activities specifically for trainers. So this was sort of the next level beyond the Train the Trainer course, and this is something that the PSA is continually talking about in terms of professional development and continuing education for trainers like yourselves. So we're going to continue to refine those materials that we piloted at the UC Davis course back in May. We hope that in the future we potentially might collaborate with others to do similar courses. You're also probably aware that this year, in July of 2018, we released version 1.1 of the Spanish curriculum. Version 1.1 of the English curriculum manual was released in December of 2017. And I just wanted to make a note because this is a question that we get quite often. Version 1.1, you're still welcome to use the version 1.0, which is the previous version. But we do encourage you to, if you're looking to purchase new manuals and you don't have a bunch in stock, we do encourage you to move to version 1.1. All of those changes between 1.0 and 1.1 are cataloged in our changelog document, so you can easily see what changed between the 2 versions of the grower training manual. So we encourage you to use version 1.1 going forward just for consistency and make sure that you're using the accurate PowerPoints that go with them, because some of the slide order did change, a few of the slides and the content did change. So we're just trying to get everybody on the same page. We currently do not have a timeline for our next version of the training manuals. We likely will wait until after we have time to digest guidance and evaluate whether the curriculum needs to change accordingly. So right now, version 1.1 is the version that everyone should be using. and those are available at the bookstore and also available for printing yourself from our website. The next three items in the milestones bullets, the educational materials and fact sheets. Donna is going to talk about that later on in this presentation. And what I'd like to talk about next is actually our training reports and our international efforts. So on our website, there is a tab that is specifically dedicated to our reporting. And we conduct reports quarterly. And if you want to see any of the previous reports, we have them all available on our website. And that link is in the URL document that we shared and also on this slide. The most recent report that I'm going to be reviewing the data from actually goes back from September of 2016 when we launched the program until September 19th of this year. So I just want to point out that there were several courses that obviously have occurred since that time, and they won't be reflected in this data. Before I launch into these very impressive milestones for training numbers, I have to say that these numbers are really a collective effort from everybody who is on this call right now. Without all of you as PSA trainers and PSA lead trainers and trainers of trainers, this type of data would not be possible to accomplish. Since September of 2016, the PSA in registered PSA grower training courses have trained 27,228 grower training participants, which I think is quite an impressive number. In addition, through our Train the Trainer courses, we've trained 2,207 Train the Trainer participants in a 2-year time span. When you look at the numbers domestically, we've hosted 58 domestic Train the Trainer courses, reaching a little over 1,500 trainers, and we now have 209 lead trainers who are based domestically. And when you look at domestic grower trainings, we've hosted 815 grower trainings with 18,893 grower training participants. Moving over to the international side, we've hosted in partnership with the Preduce International Partnership, which I'm going to talk about here shortly, 12 Train the Trainer courses, and that has reached 503 trainers. In addition, there are 32 lead trainers who are based outside of the United States. And then for grower training courses, there have been 335 international courses with 8,335 grower training participants. So in a very short timeline, we've managed to reach out to quite a few individuals, and I think that we'll continue to see that grow as some of these compliance dates start to kick in. So thank you again to all of you PSA trainers and lead trainers for contributing to these efforts. Again, it really could not be possible without your help. This is our nationwide PSA grower training course map. You'll notice that the big white spot in the center of the country, which I am proud to say, we just filled in last week. Connie Fisk was out in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and she conducted our last state to have a grower training. So we have now hosted grower trainings in all 50 states, including Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And even Hawaii and Alaska have had training. So we've had grower trainings in all of the states, and we're proud to put Wyoming on the map. And I know Connie is proud of that as well. In addition, this is our Train the Trainer course map. These are the locations where the PSA team has hosted Train the Trainer courses since September of 2016. Not all states have had a Train the Trainer course, and this is mostly because when we conduct Train the Trainer courses, we work collaboratively within states and within regions to pull in trainers from different areas. That being said, if you think there is a strong need for a Train the Trainer course in your state, please do consider reaching out to one of the PSA regional extension associates because there's a lot of things going on and a lot of efforts that are happening. But if we don't know that the need exists, we're not going to schedule a course in that area. So the other thing that I want to mention about Train the Trainer courses is over time, it just has been declining. There has been less interest in Train the Trainer courses. They're not filling as easily. So what I want to say is that if you know someone who has not been to a Train the Trainer course yet, really encourage them to take advantage of those opportunities now, because we are likely going to be hosting less just because the demand is lower. So the Train the Trainer courses, the listing can be found on our website, and we do update that as soon as we get a new course registered. So do check that out. I believe there's 4 or 5 that are currently registered across the United States, and I believe there's also one in Mexico that we have that is available for people to register now. When you look at regional trainer distribution, this is broken out by the regional center by states. So you'll see Northeast, North Central, South, and West. And of course, South and West typically lead in terms of PSA trainers and lead trainers. That's where most of our produce production is in the United States. And I think all regions, though, are making great progress in terms of developing, encouraging people to go to trainings, and then also developing individuals as lead trainers to assist in their regions. In terms of courses by region, again, the same trend. There's quite a few courses, Train the Trainer and grower training courses in the southern region and in the western region. And those, I think, will continue to increase just as farms start to become, needing to become in compliance with the rule. I'd also like to talk briefly about some of our international efforts. We have a partnership with GIFSAN, the Joint Institute for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, and it's called the Preduce International Partnership for Education and Outreach, or the PIP. And we've been working with the PIP to address a number of barriers and getting the training out to international audiences. But since 2017, there have been 12 international Train the Trainer courses that have been hosted outside of the United States, and 8 of those are through the PIP, and you'll see that in my next slide. But we are working with the PIP to adjust the language and adjust the content of the curriculum so that it's appropriate for international audiences, and trying to work to remove some of those financial barriers to international trainers becoming lead trainers. We also have been working towards developing more trainers of trainers, or TOTS, who are approved with Spanish proficiency so that we can conduct more Train the Trainer courses internationally. If you'd like to know more about the international efforts that we're working with GIFSAN on through the PIP, you can visit the website that's linked at the bottom of the slide or in the PDF that was shared. Here's the list of international courses that have been conducted so far. Those numbers in red, those are actually countries where the PIP hosted a Train the Trainer course. So there were that little 2 that's highlighted in red. There were 2 PIP Train the Trainer courses, and then there were 2 other Train the Trainer courses in Mexico for a total of 4. So internationally, I think we are making good progress. We've had quite a few grower training courses, and we are starting to build our cadre of trainers and lead trainers. I also want to make note, you see that at the bottom of the slide, that some of the courses don't have participant data. And that is because, for example, the Costa Rica course actually happened on September 21st. And this report was actually conducted on, the numbers were pooled on September 19th. So you'll see that the Train the Trainer course is there and reported, but we don't report any participants yet because we haven't confirmed who attended that course at the time of this report. So some of those numbers, they kind of trickle back to us once all of the registration is into AFTO and funnels back to us through our database. So some of this data is still being populated. When you look at numbers of trainers and numbers of lead trainers, the top 3 countries with trainers are Mexico, Peru, and Colombia. And the top 3 countries with lead trainers are also Mexico, Chile, and then a tie for Costa Rica and Ecuador. And again, if you don't see, if you're from a particular country on this list and you don't see, you know, a number next to a lead trainer and you are a lead trainer, again, some of that data is still funneling back. It takes us some time for it to get entered into the database and then get incorporated into our quarterly reports. But I would like to mention that, you know, we are encouraged to see more applicants from international participants, and we're looking forward to, you know, assisting and rolling out programs on a wider basis, not just in the United States. And just to note, you know, there's a lot of produce that comes in from Latin American countries, and that's where quite a few of our trainers and lead trainers currently reside. And lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about building PSA training capacity. This is something that I know the entire PSA team has been working very hard on. One of those things that we do to build trainer capacity is try to provide co-training and mentoring opportunities. So we try to, if we know somebody's interested in becoming a lead trainer, try to connect them with opportunities to deliver the PSA grower training to get them more experience, or even invite them to participate with us in courses that we're hosting. In addition, we try to connect folks with mentoring opportunities. Maybe there's an opportunity for someone to learn about on-farm practices where they, were weaker in one of their competency areas. So we do our best, if we know somebody's interested in getting experience, to connect them with those experiences. So if you're a trainer and you're sitting here thinking, oh, I really would like to become a lead trainer, please reach out to any one of the PSA team members, and we're more than happy to talk with you about additional opportunities for learning or additional opportunities for you to gain experience as a trainer, whether that be through courses that we host or courses of other PSA trainers. We really would like to connect you with those opportunities to get you that experience. We also have noticed expanded access to funding for lead trainer development through different types of funding mechanisms. One of those would be through the CAP funds. As another example, NECAFS has a reimbursement. NECAFS, the Northeast Center to Advance Food Safety, has funding to support lead trainer development, to pay for you to go train the trainer course, to even pay for you to submit your supplemental application. So do look for those opportunities. If you're not sure what opportunities are available, please contact us and we'll try to get you that information that's appropriate for the region that you're coming from. We also have been working on partnerships with state departments of agriculture and health to connect those individuals who are potentially going to be the ones who are on farm doing inspections for the produce safety rule, to collaborate with them and make sure that they are aware of the all of the rule requirements. And many of those state departments of agriculture and health have attended the PSA Train the Trainer course, and some of them are even lead trainers just because they wanted to make that next step. But we work closely with those organizations. And we also have worked very closely with the regional centers and helping individuals connect with existing resources and people in their states or in their regions for those educational opportunities or training opportunities. And then finally, I already talked about the Produce International Partnership, but we've been focusing a lot on international training needs and trying to build training capacity in countries outside of the U.S., especially for those countries that export large quantities of produce to the United States. So with that, I believe I am turning it over to Kristen Woods. Kristen?
You are. Thank you, Gretchen.
Great.
This next portion of the webinar is going to be about FDA updates and announcements. And actually, Don and I are going to split talking about some of these things because, as you can see, FDA has been pretty busy over the last year or so. So we've picked some of the more recent announcements to talk about, and we also wanted to highlight some of the older announcements that keep cropping up as very useful to us in training. I'm going to cover the first several. I'm going to talk about the draft PSR guidance, the small entities compliance guide, enforcement discretion and farm inspections, updates to facilities registration guidance, and inflation-adjusted cutoffs. Then Don's going to take the last three bullets there, the status of agricultural water and compliance data extensions, and he's going to talk about equivalent methods for water testing and some other FDA fact sheets that have come out over the last year. Next. All right, so this first one is probably the big one, the one that most people have been waiting a long time for, and this is the draft guidance for industry, the standards for growing, harvesting, packing, and holding for produce for human consumption. The guidance gives a lot of valuable examples to share with growers when they have questions, and it does go a little bit further than the produce safety rule itself in helping explain some of FDA's thinking on the provisions. The second item on the screen there is the Guide to Minimize Food Safety Hazards of Fresh Cut Produce Draft Guidance for Industry. I'll point out that both of these are draft guidances. They were both published a couple weeks ago, and they're in the Federal Register as of October 22nd. They're both taking comments up until April 22nd of 2019. And we are planning to host our December educators call around a discussion of these draft guidances. In the meantime, I want to encourage everyone to read both guidances and submit comments and questions to FDA that will help the growers that you guys serve better understand what they're going to need to do to comply. Along with these two guidances, FDA also published a series of fact sheets that are written in a little bit more plain language in a question and answer format. What I like about them is that they break down the guidance into subject-specific fact sheets that are a little bit more easy to hand a grower that has a specific question. So there are general fact sheets with questions and answers. There's one on health and hygiene, one on biological soil amendments, another on domesticated animals and wild animals. There's one on growing, harvesting, and packing and holding. There's one on equipment and tools and buildings, records, variances, and then there's one specifically on a glossary of terms that are used in the produce safety rule. There's also an updated compliance and exemption flowchart that everyone should take a look at, because I know that's something that we use in training quite often. Right, so all of these fact sheets are also very useful in breaking down the information for growers into manageable chunks. They give additional information on things that growers should consider in their efforts to meet the rule requirements. So I think they'll be a useful addition to training. And I want to remind everyone that Gretchen has put together the link sheet for everyone. I'm going to talk about lots of different links, so you'll find all of those in the fact sheet that Gretchen has already forwarded, and I know she'll forward again after the meeting. Next. All right, so this next guidance that we wanted to talk about is the Small Entities Compliance Guide. So it's the standards for growing, harvesting, packing, and holding produce for human consumption. What you need to know about the Food and Drug Administration regulation, specifically for small entities. And this guidance was released a little over a year ago, September of 2017. It's formatted in a question and answer format that some might find easier to understand. And easier for smaller farms to find the information that's particular to them. It is included in the 1.1 versions of the Produce Safety Alliance manual in the resources, FDA resources section there. Next. All right, so there are several announcements related to some sort of enforcement discretion. So we want trainers to be aware of these announcements, and it is particularly important for trainers to share these announcements with growers in training. It goes a long way to ease some of the anxiety that we might run into with some growers. It shows that FDA has heard some of the concerns of the industry and is listening and working with industry to address some of these challenges before implementing enforcement actions, right? So it goes a long way to ease some of the questions and anxiety that you might find from growers in the grower training. So the first bullet there is on farm and facility definition. When facilities conduct farm activities that would otherwise not be subject to current good manufacturing practices, enforcement discretion is in effect for the preventive controls rule requirements. Okay? There's also enforcement discretion on written assurances related to kill specs. So if you remember from the produce safety rule, let's say, for example, a tomato grower that's sending their tomatoes to a paste facility, they're required to receive documentation from that facility saying they're going to process the tomatoes, and vice versa. They're also supposed to get documentation both way, two-way documentation where from the grower and from the facility. So there's some enforcement discretion while the industry catches up with some of these requirements so that both sides are on the same timeline there. So some other important announcements that we want to make sure that you're aware of is the announcement related to when inspections will start. Of course, that is at least the spring of 2019 and could vary a little bit state to state to when states actually begin conducting inspections. And of course, Donna is going to talk more about this later, but there's no enforcement for Subpart E, which is the subpart related to water activities, while rulemaking for extension to compliant state is underway. Right? So I think the last one there is really key to share because of the uncertainty around implementing the water requirements. It also alerts growers to the fact that they need to continue to pay attention to what's going on with rulemaking and changes, because there could be changes in Subpart E that they will then need to be in compliance with later. All right, next. All right, this next item that we wanted to make you aware of is a video released by FDA in June of 2018 on farm inspections. It's a 38-minute long video featuring Kevin Garrity of FDA ORA and Mike Villanueva of LGMA. They're on a farm in California, and they walk the audience through a general produce safety rule inspection. You want to keep in mind that since inspections have not yet begun and state inspectors have some latitude in how they will conduct inspections, that this isn't going to, it might not represent every inspection, right? Because our states folks are individual folks and they may do things a little bit differently in different states. But I found it to be a very informative webinar and something that would be good also to share with growers to ease their fears a little bit if they have never had an audit. Then an inspection is a pretty new concept for them. You know, help get their mind around what might happen. Next. All right, and this next update is related to helping farms that qualify that might fall into the category of mixed type facilities determine if they're going to fall under the definition of a qualified facility under that rule. So to explain that a little bit further, this is important. This is important because facilities that meet the definition of a qualified facility must follow current good manufacturing practices. So to fall under the definition of a qualified facility, they have to meet one of the two bullet points on the slide there. A very small business based on a 3-year average sales of food plus the market value of any food that's manufactured, processed, packed, or held without sale. That is pulled from the preventive controls rule, right? Or the second bullet there, which is pulled from the produce safety rule. And that's the majority of sales are to qualified end users, and the average value of all food sold has to be less than $500,000, an inflation-adjusted rolling average. So the thing to note on those two definitions there, two ways to qualify as a qualified facility, is the first one is on the value of the food that is manufactured or held in that facility in addition to sales, right? The second one is just the food sales. So that's an important distinction for you guys as trainers to make sure that it is in the forefront of your attention when you're talking to potential packing houses that might fall into this category of mixed type facilities. So the other thing that I wanted to mention that goes along with this is the draft guidance for industry called the Classification of Activities as Harvesting, Packing, Holding, or Manufacturing. And this was released over 2 years ago. It's still a draft guidance, I believe. It is released in August of 2016. I wanted to mention it again in this webinar because I think that many people are unaware of it, but it gives some great examples that will help packing houses figure out which category that they're going to fall in. Are they doing things that are going to put them in the facility category or not? So I want to make sure everybody knows about that. Next. All right, and then the last item on my list before I hand this off to Don is the nifty tool on the FDA website called the FSMA Inflation Adjusted Cutoff Calculator. And what you see on the screen there is a screenshot of what you will see when you click on the Produce Safety Rule part of that FSMA calculator. And you'll see the last column there circled in yellow is the average 3-year value for qualifying for an exemption. So what used to be $500,000 in 2011 is now $539,982 there. And then you can see on the next line there, that's the cutoff for covered farms is now almost $27,000. So FDA is going to adjust that or update that calculator yearly at the end of March. And so that'll be a good tool for our growers to figure out what the numbers are for qualifying for an exemption and what the numbers are for whether or not their farm is covered for the year. Okay. All right, and I think that is all I have. So Don, I'm going to let you take it from here.
Thanks, Kristen. While you were speaking, some of our international participants in particular asked us to try to slow down the pace of speaking. So I'm going to try to slow down the pace. If you think back on a couple of slides that Kristen gave, one of them had to do with enforcement discretion. And one of the really important bits of enforcement discretion was about the water compliance dates. There was a proposed rule put out by FDA in which the compliance dates for Subpart E, which is agricultural water, were postponed until 2022 or later. It is important to know that that's a proposed rule. It has not yet been finalized, but we do expect that that rule will be finalized and those dates will push forward into 2022. Another important thing is that it applies to all provisions of Subpart E other than sprouts. Sprouts had to start complying already, and those requirements are not postponed for sprouts. This only applies for fresh covered produce other than sprouts. So it includes portions of the rule that include the safe and sanitary agricultural water quality, the annual inspection of the agricultural water system, the numeric criteria for agricultural water, that's the GM and STV of 126 and 410, and then also the monitoring requirements to ensure that agricultural water remains of safe and of adequate sanitary quality. So until the proposed rule is accepted and more is known, the water requirements of Module 5 are still important. It's important to go over these requirements to make sure that the participants in your course understand those requirements. We don't know what will happen, but we do know that at this time, participants are not required to take another training course when the rule changes. The best information they have is the information that is in the rule today. And if only small changes are made to the water portion of the rule, this is their opportunity to understand the water portion of the rule. So I just want to reinforce how important Module 5 is. Although there is enforcement discretion, and although the water requirements other than sprouts are being reconsidered, this is the opportunity that the participants have to understand the current structure of the rule, and it's their foundation for understanding what the future structure looks like. Next. So just to be perfectly clear about the water compliance dates, those proposed water-related compliance dates are 2022, 2023, and 2024, depending on the business size. Just a brief reminder for all the lead trainers out there, the business size classification numbers of 500,000, 250,000, and 250,000, excuse me, those classifications are not adjusted for inflation. The 25,000 is, but the other numbers are not adjusted for inflation. Next. When we talk to our growers and try to help them understand what they need to be doing for water now, although enforcement discretion is in place and the rule is not being enforced, there are some things that are valuable for growers so that they can help protect the quality of their produce, even though they're not currently under regulatory compliance requirements. If they're already testing the water, we encourage that they continue testing their water. That helps them understand their quality of water, and also, not to be forgotten, many of our growers are testing their water to meet buyer and audit requirements, and those buyer and audit requirements did not go away when the rule compliance date was extended. So it's important to keep water testing if they already are. Knowing the quality of water helps to identify and reduce risks. And for example, you can take surveys of your water sources to understand what are the hazards of contamination going into that water. If a grower has not been testing, they can start understanding their water quality by testing. They will test for generic E. coli. It's recommended that the testing begin before using the agricultural water, so you know what the quality of the water is before it's used, and also during frequent use periods. Next. Another big shift, another big help that FDA provided this year was the fact sheet about equivalent water testing methodologies. From the beginning, the limitation that water quality must be tested, E. coli must be tested using method 1603 or an equivalent method was a challenge because not many labs, or many labs do not provide analysis by method 1603. And it was not clear how to know whether a method was equivalent or not. So FDA did provide some information to fill that information gap, and there are some acceptable methods. There is a list of acceptable methods that can be used in place of method 1603. It's important we really want everyone to know that there were two versions. The original version only had some quantitative methods. That was in 2017. This newer version that came out in July of 2018 includes both quantitative methods and also some presence-absence methods. Your version 1.1 of the PSA manual only has the old version in the back under the tab for FDA and USDA resources. You should take out that old version of the equivalent water testing methodologies fact sheet because it only has the original quantitative methods. It would be confusing for growers to have just that original fact sheet. If you're able to replace it with the new fact sheet, or at least let your growers know that the new fact sheet exists that has presence-absence methods. And just to summarize, the production water criteria, that's the criteria that are the geometric mean and the statistical threshold value. At this time, they must use quantitative methods to calculate those values for the MWQP. The post-harvest water criteria, and that criterion is no detectable E. coli per 100 mils. Now there are other methods, including presence-absence methods, that may be used for the post-harvest water criteria. As you communicate this in your slides to the trainers in a grower training course, the PSA has provided a supplemental slide set called Recent Announcements from FDA pertaining to water. And those acceptable methods are all listed on those slides, which makes it much easier for you to get the information across to the growers in the room. Next. Oh, and I put it in here. How useful of me. So this is what one of them looks like. The quantitative methods are all listed here. Those are for production or post-harvest water because they can give you a number and they can also let you know that it's detectable or not detectable. I won't read them all off. They won't mean much to many people, but they mean a lot to the laboratories. So if you can provide these names to the laboratories, then the laboratory can be assured that they're using a acceptable methodology as the produce safety rule currently stands. Next. And then this following slide is the presence-absence methods. Again, I don't think going through the names is especially useful to you, but having that list is very useful as you and growers communicate with laboratories. Next. The next one is the rarely consumed raw fact sheet. This was printed. It's included in the version 1.1 version of the PSA manual. One of the great things about the rarely consumed raw fact sheet is that it saves the trainer from having to take time and explain the FDA's process and thinking behind the rarely consumed raw list. I'm sure that some of you on the call have your own stories of challenges that your growers throw up from the room to the front of the room. Some examples that I had were, why are sweet potatoes rarely consumed raw, but yams are not considered rarely consumed raw, although the cooking habits are similar for both. And FDA explains that not many people reported eating yams, so it was different. They couldn't meet the statistical criteria. That's explained in that fact sheet. Taro makes people sick if eaten raw. Although it cannot be eaten raw, it's still not on the rarely consumed raw list for the same reason. That logic, again, is explained in the fact sheet, and it saves the trainer from having to explain FDA's thinking. You can have that fact sheet to explain the thinking in FDA's own words. If someone asks, well, what can we do about things that don't make sense? One thing you can do is refer them to the process used by the Hawaii Department of Agriculture to address the issue of taro. And that is an example of how something that is not on the rarely consumed raw list can be addressed through the channels that are established in the Produce Safety Rule. Next. I think this is the last one. The biological soil amendments of animal origin. There was a fact sheet released by FDA in 2018, fairly recently. It explains a lot of the main issues having to do with biological soil amendments, both in the language of the rule and in plain English. Much of the BSA, much of Module 3 has to do with definitions and the time to harvest requirements. And so this is an excellent reference for our growers to go home with to help explain what is the, to have those definitions and the time to harvest requirements and the status of the time to harvest requirements. Remember that this is the section where there is a reserved time to harvest requirement, and that issue is addressed in the fact sheet. Next.
Okay, I believe that's where I start up. So in the next couple of slides, we are going to look at some of the newly developed resources, both grower-oriented resources and resources that trainers can use during a PSA grower training. And I wanted to include this slide just to give you guys a quick snapshot where you can find these resources on the PSA website. And you'll notice that we have resources in 2 different locations, kind of depending on what those resources are used for. So the first one is the general resource listing. You can find this by going to the website and clicking on resources. Some of the examples of resources here include fact sheets on water, the record-keeping fact sheet that I think is very popular. And most of these resources are really intended for grower use. However, I use them all the time as a trainer. The second location I wanted to highlight are the trainer resources. And you can find these by clicking through resources and then on that left-hand column there. The trainer resources are really helpful for you guys as trainers to use during grower training courses. And some of these include activities that you can use to sort of spicing up the grower training a little bit to just move away from some of the PowerPoint presentations. And Gretchen, if you click next. Here are some of the examples of resources that you will find between the 2 different locations on our website. Most of these are all supplemental. So these are not required that you use. However, we highly recommend them just as a way to, change it up from presenting the PowerPoint presentations. One of the newly added resources is the updated post-harvest sanitizer tool. This can be found on that general resource page. And this is essentially an Excel file that lists a number of EPA registered sanitizers. And for anybody who was on the educators call on Monday, we walked through some of these resources here. And then the additional sanitizer resource that I wanted to highlight is a new fact sheet that was just posted last week. And this really walks through how you can create a state-specific EPA registered sanitizer list. And these are both very United States centric because they are dealing with EPA registration. I just want to highlight that. The second resource that we list here is a coliform activity. This is something that Connie developed to use during the agricultural water module, especially 5.1. We get a lot of questions from growers about the difference between E. coli and fecal coliforms and pathogenic E. coli. So this is just a little fun activity that you can do to kind of demonstrate to growers, get them to stand up and to demonstrate the differences. Some of the other resources that we have on the website have been there for a little bit of time. The cleaning and sanitation activity is really nice to use during Module 6. It walks through the differences between different zones, gets growers to discuss how they might clean and sanitize different surfaces, and it always gets some really good discussion going. The required produce safety rule records, this is one that I hear trainers using all the time. It is a fact sheet as well as Word templates that can be used for the required record-keeping documents in the produce safety rule. Even though this is kind of intended for growers, I like to use this as a training tool as well when I do grower trainings and train-the-trainer courses. And I'm not going to read the rest to you, but we do have a nice PowerPoint presentation for walking through the exemptions and exclusions in the produce safety rule. It is a supplemental tool, as well as a number of videos that Connie is working on. I think Gretchen is highlighting the bouncing bear video. This is about a minute long, and it just kind of walks through how to wash your hands. So it can provide a little bit of a change up when you're presenting Module 2. Everybody loves bouncing bears and the upbeat music. And I do want to highlight in the last bullet that we will be adding Spanish language documents in the near future to the PSA website. I know there is a very large demand for that, and that is something that we are working on. Next. Thank you, Gretchen. The next thing I want to mention are the agricultural water resources. You will notice that we put these on a slide of its own because we get questions all the time from trainers that we work with about how to incorporate the updates to the agricultural water section, particularly the equivalent methods that Don highlighted, as well as questions about what is agricultural water. So we wanted to put these resources on a slide of its own. Don walked through actually some of these resources when he presented his section. But unlike some of the resources I highlighted in the first slide, I highly, highly encourage you as trainers to incorporate these resources in your grower training courses. The first one that I want to highlight are the supplemental slide set that's called Updates on Agricultural Water. Again, it is not mandatory, but they are supplemental slides. However, it is very, very important to discuss some of these updates to the rules because they have a large bearing on growers, particularly the proposed extension of agricultural water sampling requirements, as well as the updated equivalent water testing methods, those methods equivalent to method 1603. So I highly recommend that you use those slides. There's only about 4 of those, 4 or so, and incorporating them into your slide set that you present at grower trainings. The second supplemental activity is a really based on photos, but this is a walkthrough of different examples of using agricultural water and just asking, is this agricultural water, yes or no? So it's pretty fun to incorporate at the beginning of Module 5.1. And then the last one is a fact sheet that really simplifies and walks through what the required water analysis method is in the produce safety rule. And that one can be found in that general resource listing. The last thing that I wanted to mention on this slide is a webinar that Don Steckel, in collaboration with Michigan State, presented back in June. And this is a project that Michigan is working on about how to create a national water lab map for farms. So the idea here being that growers can go to this map and they can find a hopefully local lab that will do the necessary testing. This webinar is not currently publicly available. However, there is a standard operating procedure on the NECAF's website. So they're looking for collaborators for this project. And I do want to mention here, if you look at the URL list that Gretchen provided,
We do highlight on the PSA website all of the regional centers that cover the United States, as well as a couple of additional projects, the Local Food Safety Collaborative and the Tribal Nations Group out of University of Arkansas. So if you go to their website, most of those regional centers have a number of great resources. The Northeast website, or NECAFs, they host a national clearinghouse. So I wanted to mention this as an additional resource that is not PSA-centric. But on that NECAFs clearinghouse, I noticed there's a lot of other regions that are posting resources, and including on that website is the standard operating procedure for creating this water testing map. And I think with that, I think it's on to the next person.
All right, online grower training course. Last fall, we piloted an online version of Module 2 and received valuable feedback, which we've used in development of the remaining modules to create an online version of the PSA grower training within the eCornell platform. Participants in the course will receive a hard copy of the grower training manual, and they will have 3 weeks to work through the material. In addition to pages that correspond to each slide in the manual, online participants will be presented with self-check questions to make sure that we are hitting each one of the module's learning objectives. They'll also receive several case studies and videos to help them better understand the topic in the same way that trainers would go into more detail during a training. And they'll also have 6 required discussions to apply the content to their individual operations. We're currently in the final stages of review and edits, and we hope to launch a pilot in early 2019. And just like our face-to-face grower trainings, the online course will meet the requirements of 112.22c, and participants will receive an AFDO certificate. Next. All right, PSA Communications. So we have several different listservs that you can sign up for. First is our general listserv. We currently have 4,296 members, and you can sign up for that listserv by visiting the Produce Safety Alliance website and scrolling to the bottom of our homepage. There's a link there to join that general listserv. The next one is our educator listserv. We have 372 members of that listserv right now. And you can contact Michelle Humiston at the email on your screen if you would like to sign up, or you can visit that web link right there. We've held 8 Zoom meetings in 2018 with about 500 educators in attendance, so that's a pretty active group. And then the third listserv we have is the PSA Trainers and Lead Trainers listserv. Currently has 2,364 members. You have all automatically been enrolled in that listserv after you attended a Train the Trainer course. But if you have changed jobs, changed emails, we encourage you to visit our trainer directory using the web link that's on your screen right now to update your contact information so you continue to receive those emails. Next. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is our social media. So to stay connected with the Produce Safety Alliance and learn about our upcoming trainings and available resources, we encourage you to like us on Facebook, next, and follow us on Twitter. So we do have active accounts on both Facebook and Twitter. We encourage you to find us there. You can send questions, share, tag us in your posts about grower trainings and Train the Trainer courses you're holding, and we'll help you boost the signal. All right, on to the next person.
Okay, thanks everybody. This is Gretchen again. I just have a couple quick policy reminders, and these are all things that you've received during your Train the Trainer courses and also through the manuals that you received during your Train the Trainer course. So this is nothing new. We just want to give a couple quick reminders because these are things that we're seeing come up as challenges to the process of hosting courses. So one of the things that I wanted to mention is that the PSA does reserve the right to conduct course audits and to potentially revoke course registrations if they're not following PSA policies, or to suspend trainer status if we find out that the training course protocols haven't been met. Again, all of those policies can be reviewed under the course information or the trainer information tabs of your training manual, and those are located in the very back of your manual from the Train the Trainer course. In addition, I wanted to talk quickly about evaluations. When you register a course with AFTO, they will send you an email with some instructions. We really encourage you to follow those instructions, especially about how things must be printed and sent to all of your course participants and then returned to AFTO, because we have noticed and we have been auditing the receipt of evaluations and implemented a tracking system. And what we will start doing is sending warning letters to lead trainers if 3 or more course evaluations are not returned to AFTO within 90 days. We really do look at this data because it helps us improve the quality of PSA grower training courses and ensure the quality of the trainers themselves. So we want to make sure that those are returned from every course. So we will begin tracking those, and you may be contacted if you have not returned those evaluations back to AFTO within 90 days. Just as an example and as a reminder, when you receive the evaluation from AFTO, you'll notice at the top right-hand corner, there's always going to be a course number, a course date, a location, and the trainers. This all came from your course registration form that you filled out when you submitted it to AFTO. Do not edit any of this information. If something changes, for example, if a trainer changes or you have to move the location and you know far enough advance, please contact AFTO and they will issue you a new set of course evaluations, because when we receive these, we scan them. And we keep track of who the trainers are in the course. We keep track of the course dates. And especially important are these course identification numbers. So please do not reuse copies of previous evaluations for courses. Every course is going to have a specific course identification number, and that should be reflected on the evaluations that you receive from AFTO. If you send us back poorly or incorrectly printed copies of evaluations, we can't process them with our evaluation scanning software. So what that looks like is, that was just an example here I'm showing you. Don't write in your own content here. Make sure you keep the original. But as an example of what we expect from printing the evaluations, the instructions are outlined in the email you receive from AFTO. Only use white paper, 28-pound thickness. You can do 2-sided duplex printing. Don't use photocopied versions. We find that people take one copy and then photocopy them, and that results in a poor quality evaluation that we cannot scan. And this one's especially important. In the printing settings, print evaluations at 100% size. Don't select the fit or scale to fit page. And then make sure your participants use blue or black ink and stay inside the boxes. Just as a few examples of things that we see that cause us to not be able to scan your evaluations and provide that data to you are different printing scales. So in this case, you can see someone printed one course with 3 different printing scales. As another example, someone used 2 different paper sizes. And because we use a template when we scan these and read them, we can't read 2 different paper sizes for the same course. And then finally, this is just gross. Don't return things to us like this. Please do your best to try to keep them in good condition and return them to us so that we can scan those and we can make that data available for you to evaluate your own programs. Make sure that you remember to register your courses at least 2 weeks in advance. This gives AFTO the necessary time to generate all that registration paperwork and set up the course. We will not accept retroactive registrations unless all the paperwork can be presented, which means you need to have PSA evaluations, you need to have all the course documentation, the names of the participants, their addresses, and then you need to have proof of a PSA lead trainer and trainer attendance, and then it would be subject to a $250 administrative fee. So to avoid that, just register your courses 2 weeks in advance. And then make sure, I already mentioned this, keep AFTO up to date. If anything changes, the location, the date, the trainers, all of that is going to impact not just the training certificate that the participants receive, but also when we evaluate trainers of trainers, we look at courses that they've taught. And if their name isn't on that course, we can't look at those evaluations. So make sure that the trainers are listed and it's accurate to reflect what happened at that course, the location and the date. You should have all received an email from us, and again, this would come from the PSA listserv. It should say PSA trainers and lead trainers, but we did update the USB content. So if you remember when you attended the Train the Trainer course, you received a flash drive or a USB drive, and that had all of the teaching content, so all of the PowerPoint modules and additional resources for teaching the PSA course. We have recently updated that. It is available for download on our website. So feel free to go online, download the modules, download all of the other documents. The modules that are posted on the USB content now will be version 1.1. So I encourage everybody to update their training content through this link. And then make sure that you keep your contact information up to date. We have a PSA trainer directory, and that is accessible through the training tab, and then there's a drop down for the directory. And at the very bottom of that page, there's a section that says update my entry. This allows you to update your contact information so that other trainers can contact you. And it also allows you to, if you chose to opt out of being listed on this trainer directory, you can opt back in by emailing us, and there's instructions on the website to do that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Betsy Bin to wrap up the meeting.
Okay, hopefully you all can hear me well enough. I know we had issues a little earlier.
We can hear you.
The other thing I want to say before I talk about the 2019 goals, I know there's a lot of discussion in the box about evaluations. The PSA and you all were mandated to do evaluation through FDA and USDA. It's part of the requirements of the PSA. So I know sometimes the evaluations represent a challenge, and you have to collect them and get them back to us. But it really is critical to what our deliverables are. So I just wanted to add that. When we talk about 2019 goals, I just want to pause before I go through this slide and say, I think the webinar so far has been really comprehensive and a really good highlight of what's been happening the last year and the kind of information the PSA finds valuable. And it really relates to our goals moving forward. The first is to continue to support PSA trainers, lead trainers, and those that are interested in becoming PSA trainers and lead trainers. This includes everything from the mentoring that we discussed earlier, as well as our monthly webinars and things like this. Our goal is to support you all while you're out there training growers. And that is a huge part of what we do and takes up a lot of our time. But it is also a goal that we will maintain moving forward. Along with that is to support growers in both their understanding of the produce safety rule requirements and, importantly, how to implement practices to reduce risk. The PSA is here to help growers understand the regulatory language, but the reality is the most important part of what we're doing is helping growers put food safety practices in place on the farm to reduce risk. And I can't state that enough. So that means all the educational materials, the support of trainers so growers are getting good information, all of that is a huge goal and will remain a goal as we move forward. As was discussed by Connie, we are going to complete and launch the PSA online course. In the chat box, somebody asked if that was going to be available in Spanish, and the answer is yes. We will focus on getting the English course out there, piloted, troubleshoot any of the problems, and then, of course, translate that immediately into Spanish so that we can launch the Spanish course. Also, when I introduced Laura, I mentioned developing a PSA Spanish web interface so that we have those materials available. Translating things into Spanish as well as other languages has always been a priority for us, so this just takes it to the next step. And lastly, and certainly not our last goal, but the last goal I want to highlight is completing some peer-reviewed publications to ensure we're sharing data that's been generated. We have a lot of information, whether it be from the water summit, from the soil summits, from the evaluation data we have, but we really will have an emphasis in 2019 in trying to get that information out there to our trainers, to our peers in a format that growers can see. But we think it's really important to share that data with people and get it out there in a form that is productive. Next slide. There's been questions about our funding, and anyone who's heard me speak in the last year, we've been talking about funding concerns. I still think we're on that slide unless my computer's not updating. But in terms of funding, we have received some additional funding, and that will take the PSA through 2020, a little bit into 2021. Funding is still a concern for us in that I suspect there will be needs that extend far beyond that 2020 year. When we look at the implementation of water requirements and we look at other things that are going on, I think there will still be a need. I do think the PSA provides unique outreach and assistance that's important to growers, trainers, and the produce industry as a whole. And sustainable PSA funding is a challenge. On many of the calls with the educators, we've discussed what people charge for courses. I think most of us realize that the average American grower, let alone our international growers, are probably not in a position to pay $1,000 to attend a course. We did some listening sessions around the country with processors as part of a different project, and many of the small processors had not attended FSPCA training because they could not afford it. So I think that's the same problem we face with farmers. And so creating trainings where we charge what it actually costs is probably not really viable at this juncture for our farmers, certainly not as a sustainable funding source for the PSA. And to this discussion of why the PSA is valuable, I did want to talk about the importance of some of the things we do and some of the unique positions we fill. Certainly, far and away, the most important thing is collaboration. Collaboration with trainers, collaboration with the university, collaboration with industry, our regulatory personnel at the state, at the federal level. All of that is very important. Making sure information is shared, making sure growers have information in a form they understand is critical. Facilitating dialogue and discussion through things like the Water Summit or the Soil Summit, that is also something that I think we do well and that has resulted in good communication, which is very important. I think sometimes undervalued, but very important. We also provide up-to-date resources and educational materials. Folks look to us to take information that comes out and make sure we're looking at it, turning it into an educational material or a resource that is useful, including things like those supplemental slides so that people can use that information. Developing PSA trainers and lead trainers is absolutely within the purview of what we do, and really one of those things that we do. And there are TOTS around there, but we are the real core of approving TOTS, approving those trainers, and developing those folks. Certainly updating the PSA curriculum, making sure we have a change log, so when people send us comments, edits, corrections, we can include that and stay on top of any of those changes. And lastly, providing development opportunities, whether it be, again, those educational webinars, materials, webinars like this to keep everybody on the same page. I think those are critical things that the PSA does and that I think are really necessary as we move forward. So with that, that was my last slide, and that'll bring us to the PSA website. I think Gretchen has a few words she wants to say to wrap it up, but before I hand it back to her, I want to stress that everything that was talked about, all the resources, the links to all the PSA team members, links to Facebook, Twitter, our listserv, all of that stuff is on the website. And I really appreciate the PSA team, the effort they put in every day, responding to requests, training people. It really is a fabulous team, and I can't say enough about them. I really want to say thank you to all of you as the trainers and the lead trainers. We know the process. The PSA process is not simple. We try to make it simple, but I think the importance is that we are offering growers a consistent quality message that we are really trying to refine and make sure that all of the information they get is correct, so that the time and the money and the effort they spend on implementing practices actually reduces risk and is effective. I think that is so important when we talk about farmers who do not have a lot of resources. They don't have a lot of extra time. A huge priority for the PSA is making sure the information we get to them is valid and correct, and that they can use that information effectively to reduce risks, meet market demand, and meet regulatory requirements if they are subject to those. So thank you very much for your time. I'll turn it over to Gretchen because I'm pretty sure you have a few final words.
Yep. Thank you so much, Betsy, and everyone else on the PSA team for your presentations. I just want to reiterate that we have recorded this meeting, and as soon as I can sit down, write out the notes, we will be sending out both the PowerPoint slides that you saw today, as well as notes, which Laura Acuna Maldonado has agreed to translate for us. So those will also go out in Spanish. The notes will be in Spanish as well as English. And then we will also send this webinar recording so that if you missed parts of it or you just really want to rewatch the meeting, you have that flexibility to do so. So we really appreciate all of your comments. There was a ton of dialogue going on in the Q&A and in the webinar chat. If there was something that we weren't able to get to, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, any one of the PSA team members. So if you go up to the Contact Us tab on our website, all of our contact information is up on that website, and I know that anybody on the team would be happy to answer your questions. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And I just want to echo what Betsy said. We really appreciate your participation on this call, as well as your participation in PSA's overall programs and getting out to do great work with trainers across the United States and the world. So thanks everybody for joining today. This is going to conclude our webinar, and we'll be following up with these resources shortly. Have a great day, and be safe trick-or-treating if you celebrate Halloween. Take care, everyone.